first individual that's gonna pop out on stage right now, introduce himself and an illustrious panel that is gonna give you the information that you are here to seek, is the man, the myth, the legend, the managing partner at Kaufman McGowan, here to have an incredible conversation surrounding conquering the Big Apple, challenges and opportunities of operating in New York City. Make some noise for Neil Kaufman.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm the managing partner at Kaufman McGowan, one of the leading corporate cannabis law firms in the country. And when I'm not running my law firm, I'm on the board of trustees and chairman of the audit committee of 2 mutual fund families and the chairman of a couple of nonprofit organizations, including one that has helped local companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars over the years and contribute thousands of jobs to the local economy. I'd like to introduce our panelists here this morning. First of all, Nigist Abebe, the Vice President of Public Policy at Columbia Care, one of the large MSOs, which is also a New York licensee. Also joining us is Matthew Bernardo, president of Housing Works, which is a nonprofit organization based in New York that opened the first legal card dispensary in the entire state. Matt? And Brett Schuman, the co-chair of the cannabis practice at Goodwin. So we're here to talk about the New York market. And before we dive into the panel, for any of you who may not be as intimately familiar with it as some of us may be, I thought it might be helpful to just provide a little bit of background. So New York is the classic case of the road to hell paved with good intentions. New York started in the medical market with a mandatory vertical integration structure where the 10 existing registered organizations were all required to do everything from cultivate to sell retail. As a result, all the MSOs that own almost all of the registered organization licenses invested millions and millions of dollars building all these facilities with the expectation that when the recreational market came, they would be there to benefit from it. Unfortunately, in the dying days of the Cuomo administration, the legislation that actually passed the New York legislature imposed a fundamentally different structure banning vertical integration. The regulators at the New York Office of Cannabis Management were left to try to figure out how do you make that work? And they've really struggled with this. Many of the folks at OCM are great people, smart people. We all know some of them who've been involved in the industry for years, but they were left with a virtually impossible task. And while it took them a while to figure that out, they took this super activist approach to try to jumpstart the market. They decided to give retail licenses to folks who had problems with cannabis justice in their past, previous New York State convictions. That spurred a lawsuit by an out-of-stater who got an injunction holding up the whole program, the program in 5 jurisdictions for an extended period because they claimed they were being discriminated against having an out-of-state conviction. And then to provide the supply for these planned retail stores, they took another fairly unprecedented step of granting conditional cultivation and processing licenses to all the distressed and failing hemp farmers throughout the state on the theory that they could pivot their farms and facilities to grow cannabis and provide the supply for the retail stores. You know what happens when hemp farmers try to grow cannabis the first time. They generally grow pretty bad cannabis with a few exceptions because it's a challenge. And lo and behold, the stores took longer to get started. New York was even more active. They planned to have a $200 million public-private fund to fund the building of all these stores, which would be done by a state agency, the New York State Dormitory Authority, that would find the locations, lease them from the landlords, sublease them to these equity retail licensees, and all that would be funded by this fund. Of course, as we could sort of easily predict, the fund failed. They've raised barely any money. DASNY has failed to sign very many licenses, identify premises. As a result, there are 7 stores open with a glut of flower grown by all these poor former hemp farmers who are now struggling to find a market for their crops. In the meantime, OCM finally issued a few months ago proposed regulations which were fairly universally panned by the market for a variety of reasons that we'll discuss today. Thousands of comments were submitted. We ourselves submitted a 75-page comment letter with a red line of the regulations to try to help them out. We're told they're shooting for May 11th to come out with a second set of proposed regulations, which will then go through another round of public comments with final regulations, hopefully in hand by August, license applications expected in the fourth quarter, and licenses beginning to be issued by the end of 2023. That is the hope, at least. So some things we have to give the OCM credit. They've done really some yeoman's work under some difficult circumstances. They've implemented aggressive training and mentoring programs, realizing that all of these equity licensees who don't have experience in the industry needed to learn fast how to do it. Super aggressive training and mentoring. They created this transition pathway for the hemp farmers and cultivators. They've tried their best with what they had at their disposal to facilitate the market. But fundamentally, New York State is the Washington State model on steroids. Has anyone who's ever done a deal in Washington liked that model? I haven't seen anyone that has. So that's a fundamental problem. There have been these two major lawsuits, the one I mentioned earlier, and then last week or the week before, several of the MSOs filed a lawsuit about guess what? How they've been, how they're struggling with this new structure that's going to impose significant delays and costs on them getting into the recreational market. The fund has failed, the real estate program has failed, and the general consensus around the halls here is that New York is virtually uninvestable. The really ironic thing is that of all the licensees, who's going to benefit the most? It's going to be the self-funded rich white guys, exactly the people that the legislature the opposite of the folks the legislature was trying to help, who are going to be able to self-fund their operations and get off the ground and have a chance to succeed. So there's been a very slow rollout, no transition pathway for the ROs, no realistic transition anyway, and of course a raging black market with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pop-up locations and other illegal operations, as well as the continuation of the legacy black market. So a few things have gone well. I think we all philosophically applaud the strong emphasis on equity. And you have to give the government credit for aggressively trying to help, with the training and the funding and all the things. Not all of it has succeeded, but they have tried very hard. The good thing in New York is also bank accounts are available. There are at least 4 banks in New York that will bank cannabis companies. And there's plenty of supply for the retailers, ironically. Just not quite enough demand for that supply.